The Japanese garden is located within the gardens at Lake Merritt at Lakeside Park in Oakland. It's owned by the City Park and Recreation Department and managed as a rental facility. All activities, social as well as work, in the garden must be reserved. Although the City Public Works Department is responsible for the garden, we have had good cooperation with, starting with Toro Rocha, the previous supervisor, to allow the Merritt College Pruning Club to provide the maintenance of the garden. This is an informal arrangement that we, representing the Merritt College Pruning Club, have made to assure satisfactory standards of aesthetic pruning, as well as assuring the continuance of the design intent of the originators of this garden. The garden was designed by Hisaichi Tokawa, who supervised its construction. It was dedicated in 1960. It's designed as a viewing garden, in this case to be viewed from the garden room, which gives the impression that the room is intruding into the garden. The red lines in the bottom of this sketch are the glass doors and windows of the garden room. In this sketch, the pond water is blue, and behind the pond, the green area is raised. As has been done in Japan for hundreds of years, the pond was dug out, and the removed soil became the mound behind the pond. These old construction photos are fun, particularly for those of us familiar with the garden. The garden was built principally by the Japanese American community of Oakland and the East Bay, with the support of the local nursery industry. The concrete bridge has been installed in this one. In the left background is an apparent pile of the soil that was removed to dig the pond. This construction photo shows both bridges, and most of the rocks have been placed. Following are a couple of recent photos. Here are the two photos of the same area. Let's go to 12. And here's a 1960s photo of the concrete bridge, which shows the landscaping at that time. To those of you familiar with the garden, you know that most of these plants are still here, and they continue to be maintained by the Merritt College Pruning Club. Unfortunately, by 1985, this garden showed a lack of proper maintenance. Probably the most important thing in the history of maintenance of this garden was in 1985, when Oakland's vice mayor, Frank Ogawa, asked Dennis Makishima to take his pruning students to the garden to perform some badly needed restoration and maintenance. That was the start of what became the Merritt College Pruning Club's relationship with this garden. It is the oldest continuing pruning club project. Dennis Makishima, who initiated the aesthetic pruning classes at Merritt College, led his students working in this garden, and in 1992, Dennis passed the lead for this project on to Bill Castellan. Bill leads the Merritt College Pruning Club volunteer all-day sessions, one day each May and October. During these sessions, he mentors the pruning students and leads the day's work while demonstrating and teaching aesthetic pruning. He also leads the monthly First Friday maintenance days, when we work for an hour or two on maintenance starting at 8 a.m. Bill is the master gardener of this garden. The last thing Dennis said when he turned this over to Bill was, "This garden needs water." This garden was built without irrigation. Bet Neri and I brought hoses and sprinklers from home for a couple of years to irrigate this garden. Then Bill suggested the Merritt College landscape irrigation class could provide an irrigation system. We contacted Sean O'Sullivan, the class instructor, who agreed to design and direct the installation of the irrigation system. This is the area where the new valves were installed. It was pretty tough, trenching in a 50-year-old garden. In 1998, at the conclusion of this irrigation project, Oakland Mayor Elihu Harris and the Oakland City Council expressed their gratitude by issuing a proclamation thanking Sean, the students, and the businesses who contributed to this project. Not incidentally, by now, this system needs renovation. Over the years that we have been working here, we have encountered several instances of vandalism. The damaged plexiglass in the Azamaya here has been removed and new wood screening installed. We tried to fence the public off from the garden with these bamboo hoops, but vandals didn't seem to like them. This garden has a nice old granite lantern. Twice since we have been working here, and this lantern has been tipped over and damaged by vandals. The first time, Bill reinstalled it on its original date, but I'll let Bill explain how he set it up.
Well, after it was destroyed the second time, we had American Soil drill completely through each piece of the lantern up to the very top. And we installed a 1/2-inch threaded rod all the way through into a very significant concrete foundation under the base of the lantern so that the whole thing is tied together. It's also epoxied. The rods are epoxied into the core of the lantern and into it actually goes right through the firebox and up into the top, and everything's glued together. So hopefully they will not be able to knock this down this time. It took an awful lot of energy to do it the last time, so I wish the people could put their energy to something else. But hopefully now we're in good shape and it'll remain this way for quite a long time.
This is a photo, another vandalism photo. Fortunately, this graffiti was chalk and has been washed off. This gate was damaged by vandals. In 2005, Peter Boyer asked us if we could arrange for use of the garden center for an October 2005 meeting and demonstration by Keizuru Kai, a Japanese carpentry group, which annually does a demonstration in the US. Sure, we could try to help with that arrangement, and maybe Keizuru Kai could help us by demonstrating and building us a new gate. Peter Boyer introduced us to Jay Van Arsdale in the center of this photo. Jay teaches traditional Japanese carpentry at Laney College. He arranged for Keizuru Kai to build the new gate. Students came from far and away. We arranged with the director of Oakland Parks and Recreation for Keizuru Kai to design, build, and install the new garden gate at the garden center at no charge in exchange for the new gate. The Japanese carpenters and students starting work inside the garden center. They had planing contests. Ever heard of them? Here's a photo of the artists working and the students observing the work. And here's the new gate being raised. That was pretty thrilling. And here, the finished new gate. Subsequently, we had to raise the money to have the big lantern moved out of the way of the new fence section. Jay Van Arsdale told us about the Creative Work Fund, which awards grants for a collaboration between a nonprofit and an artist. In 2009, the Creative Work Fund made a grant to our collaboration, which was the nonprofit Friends of the Japanese Garden, and the artist, Jay Van Arsdale, working in the category of traditional arts. The grant was for $30,000. My wife, Rena, was instrumental in writing the grant. And then the Fence and Gates project began, entailing the design and installation of the other two gates and replacement of the old original fencing encircling the garden. These are photos of the installation of the largest of the three gates. Jay has been studying and teaching and practicing Japanese style woodworking for years. He continues teaching at Laney College. Jay designed and with his students constructed the fence and the two other gates surrounding the Japanese garden. In this photo, the two parallel pieces in the top of the photo are fence posts, which will be installed upright. And the piece on the bottom is a section of the top of the fence. With his experience, Jay knew where and how to buy the material that he needed, mostly Western red cedar, some from British Columbia. He and his students did the work on the material in either Jay's Oakland shop or the Laney College shop, and then delivered the parts to the garden to be assembled and installed. It was fascinating to watch them work. The gates were the most complicated parts. Here's Jay on the job measuring a piece of plum branch, which I think came from his own garden, to be installed on this gate. As we have worked in the garden, it became necessary to become an organization in order to raise money. I told Bill, you be the president, I'll be the secretary treasurer, so that we can sound like we're an organization. We call it Friends of the Japanese Garden. We joined the Friends of Oakland Parks and Recreation so they could be our fiscal sponsor and deposit and disperse funds for us, and that gave us 501c3 status. Now we have also joined East Bay Garden Center, Inc. and have another tax sheltered account. To keep this garden going, we coordinate with Oakland Public Works, the Oakland Park and Rec Advisory Commission, Oakland Parks and Recreation, donors, the gardens at Lake Merritt, volunteers, and we work here as the Merritt College Pruning Club. Certain changes have occurred in the garden since it was built. I'm going to share a few of those with you now. Written on the back of the photo this slide is made from is 1 gallon pine planted on small island on right side of pond at lakeside, unquote, dated August 1988. And in this regard, in June of this year, Dennis Makishima wrote to me, the small pine on the island replaced the pine that died. The small pine was a sacrificial one. Didn't want to use a good pine that might also die. So this tree came from our, what I'll call our mentor, Dennis Makishima. Dennis Makishima started the aesthetic pruning classes at Merritt College. And it's quite a few people watching this today probably were mentored by Dennis. And he's been very effective in the pruning community. And I'll have to say, as I always think about Dennis, I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Dennis Makishima. Just outside the garden fence is a tall lamppost. It is visible from inside the garden. Bill Castellan furnished and installed this strobus pine, eastern white pine, to obscure the view of the lamppost from inside the garden. And in that same outside bed, we planted these 3 cedars, which were donated by Pacific Nurseries in Tacoma. These cedars also soften the view from inside the garden. What is now called the Sensory Garden was being restored. This Chamaecyparis became an orphan. In its original location, it had been squeezed between a concrete wall and the edge of a concrete pond. We took it and installed it in the Japanese garden, leaning over the pond. It had a very small root ball, so initially we had to brace it up for a few years. In 1963, the Millers donated the Azumaya. It is unknown if Mr. Tsukawa was involved in this. A few years ago, bees infested the space between the roof and the ceiling. We had to find a beekeeper to remove the bees and their honeycombs. The original shingles started falling off the Azumaya and the roof started leaking. Last year, the city hired a contractor to replace the old roof, and that contractor did a commendable job. And we were happy to thank Martin Tovar, the city's construction supervisor, for the new roof. After Kazurokai installed that first new small gate, Bill Castellan set 2 rocks and planted a camellia and a pine outside that fence. What looks like a rock in the back in this photo is actually fiberglass made to look like a rock. It covers the backflow preventer for the irrigation system. The city's irrigation plumber insisted that we hide the backflow preventer because there was a vandal who was cutting out and removing plumbing fixtures from parks all over the town to sell at a scrapyard. This presentation has been about the history of the Japanese garden. Since 1992, everything we've done here really is for the good of the future of this garden. And here's a word about the future. Although there had been discussion about pavement replacement for several years, actually planning probably started in 2012 when May Kandarian and I created a scale drawing of the garden shown here. The blue line represents the proposed expansion of the redwood planter beds, and the red line shows the extent of the paving. We have to replace the cracked pavement, which has become a tripping hazard. But just as importantly, we need to preserve the health of the redwoods. Initially, we focused on what type of paving material to use. We know that we need to have paving that can be lifted and replaced as the redwood roots grow and raise the paving, creating tripping hazards. We have settled on 2-foot by 2-foot concrete pavers shown here in a schematic on this drawing. We consulted with arborist Steve Batchelder and Garden Man, who helped develop this plan. In 1962, the retaining walls around the redwood planter beds were shorter. You can see that in the lower left part of this photo. The retaining walls today are much higher as the redwood trees have matured. Also, today's retaining wall is old retaining walls, which will have to be changed in the future when the paving is replaced. These are 2 present-day photos. The white paint marker shows the size of the needed expansion for the 2 redwood beds. This will require new irrigation, new plantings, and new retaining walls. In March 2012, we helped arrange for a meeting of NAJGA, the North American Japanese Garden Association, in the Garden Center building. In attendance at that meeting was Sadafumi Uchiyama, who is the curator of the Portland Japanese Garden. He was part of the program that day. He reminded us that Japanese gardens are very old. For example, about 20 years ago, Bill and I worked in a garden in Japan that was installed in the year 1400. That is 600 years ago. Our garden here is only about 60 years old. So now it's time to make plans, at least for the next 60 years. Bill and I probably won't be around here in 60 years. So if any of you would like to become involved in assuring the future of this wonderful little garden, please contact Bill Castellan or me. To wrap up, I would like to make one more comment. This garden was conceived and exists because of volunteers. there is no guaranteed funding to hire the work that is done here. Since its conception and on into its future, volunteers will take the lead. Thanks.